The sound of Italian leather shoes echoed across the marble lobby of the Grand Lancaster Hotel as Ramon Fernandez walked with quiet confidence. At 53, the Filipino CEO of Pacific International Investments carried himself with the dignified posture of a man who had built an empire from nothing. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed, his tailored charcoal suit immaculate, but it was his eyes subservient, patient, and wise that reflected his true power. Rain tapped gently against the hotel's glass facade as dusk settled over the city. The familiar scent of luxury polished wood, fresh flowers, and expensive cologne filled the air. Rayon inhaled deeply, noting every detail. This wasn't just a stay at an exclusive hotel. It was a reconnaissance mission. Tomorrow, Pacific International would potentially finalize a $2.88 billion acquisition deal that would make the Grand Lancaster the crown jewel of their expansion into North America. The marble-topped reception desk gleamed under soft lighting as Ramon approached. Behind it stood Edward Garrison, a man in his 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair and an impeccable uniform. His practiced smile faltered momentarily when he looked up and saw Ramon's distinctly Filipino features. "Good evening," Ramon said, his voice carrying the slight musical lilt of his homeland despite decades of international business. "I have a reservation." Ramon Fernandez. Edward's polite expression remained fixed, but something shifted in his eyes, a subtle assessment that Ramon had encountered countless times throughout his career. "Of course, sir," Edward replied, his tone suggesting Ramon had perhaps wandered into the wrong establishment. "Let me check our system." Ramon placed his Filipino passport on the counter. The deep blue document with the golden coat of arms lay in stark contrast to the white marble. Edward's fingers tapped against the keyboard with practiced efficiency. "Ah, yes, I see it here." One night in hour he paused, looking up with a hint of disbelief. "Presidential suite." "That's correct," Ramon confirmed calmly. "I'll need to see a card for incidental, sir," Edward said. Emphasis on the last word making it sound more like an afterthought than a courtesy. Ramon withdrew his wallet and placed a titanium Centurion card, the legendary American Express black card, on the counter. The metal card made a quiet but distinctive sound as it touched the marble. Edward's eyebrows rose slightly. He picked up the card with 2 fingers as if doubting its authenticity. "One of these," he commented loud enough to be heard by guests nearby. "We sometimes have issues with verification. Let me make sure it's active." An elderly couple seated in plush armchairs across the lobby exchanged glances. If this story moved you, imagine what's next. Subscribe to Global Truth Project. An older woman with elegant silver hair narrowed her eyes at the receptionist's comment. Ramon remained silent, his face betraying nothing. But his grandmother, Esperanza's words echoed in his mind. "Your dignity is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you respond." After a moment that stretched too long, Edward's expression changed to one of poorly concealed surprise. "It appears to be functioning," he said, returning the card. "Now, about your reservation. I see there's actually an issue with the presidential suite. Maintenance problems. We'll have to place you in an executive suite instead." Ramon knew it was a lie. His team had confirmed everything just hours earlier. "That will be adequate," Ramon replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. As Edward processed the change, Ramon noticed an elderly housekeeper pushing a cart nearby. Her name tag read Martha Johnson. Despite her age as somewhere in her 70s, Ramon guessed she moved with purpose, her uniform pressed despite the late hour. Their eyes met briefly, and she offered a genuine smile that contrasted sharply with Edward's artificial one. "Your key, Mr. Fernandez," Edward said, sliding a card across the counter. 15th floor. The elevators are to your right." "Thank you," Ramon replied, collecting his passport and credit card. "By the way, I believe Mr. Coburn is expecting me tomorrow morning. Please let him know I've arrived." Edward's face pulled slightly at the mention of the general manager's name. "Mr. Coburn, you're here for the acquisition meeting?" "Yes," Ramon confirmed softly. "Good night, Mr. Garrison." Ramon walked away, aware of Edward's stunned expression burning into his back. In the elevator, alone at last, he pulled out his phone and made a note. First impression disappointing. The executive suite, while luxurious, was indeed a downgrade from what had been reserved. Ramon took in the view of a nearby office building rather than the promised panorama of the park and river. On the coffee table sat a welcome basket with a handwritten note. "Welcome to the Grand Lancaster, Mr. Hernandez." They hadn't even bothered to get his name right. Ramon placed his suitcase on the luggage rack and methodically unpacked, his mind already formulating questions for tomorrow's meeting. From his window, he could see light coming from the presidential suite across the courtyard, clearly not under maintenance, as claimed. As he prepared for bed, Ramon thought about his grandmother, Esperanza, who had worked as a housekeeper in a Manila hotel for nearly 5 decades. How many times had she been invisible to guests who looked right through her? How often had her name been forgotten or mispronounced? Tomorrow would be interesting. But tonight, Ramon would sleep well, knowing that sometimes the most valuable lessons come disguised as slights. What Edward and the management of the Grand Lancaster didn't realize was that every interaction was part of Ramon's evaluation. Every dismissive glance, every assumed limitation, every small dishonesty. And in the morning, when contracts worth billions awaited signatures, these moments would be remembered. Ramon's phone buzzed with a text from his daughter Sophia. "How's the hotel, Papa? Worth the investment?" He smiled at her question and typed back, still evaluating, "Some things money can't buy." Then he set his alarm for 6 a.m. He wanted to observe the hotel during the morning rush to see how staff treated different guests when they thought no one important was watching. After all, as his grandmother had taught him, the true character of any establishment isn't revealed in the shine of its marble floors, but in the dignity with which it treats every person who walks through its doors. The soft knock on Ramon's door came precisely at 7:30 a.m. He had been awake for over an hour, reviewing acquisition documents while sipping strong black coffee from the in-room machine. "Housekeeping," called a gentle voice. If this story moved you, imagine what's next. Subscribe to Global Truth Project. Ramon opened the door to find Martha Johnson, the elderly housekeeper he had noticed the previous evening. Close up, he could see the fine lines around her eyes that spoke of decades of hard work. But there was a brightness in her gaze that suggested an unbroken spirit. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson," Ramon said, surprising her by knowing her name. "Please come in." Martha's eyebrows rose slightly. "Good morning, Mr. Fernandez. Would you like your room service now, or should I return later?" "Now is perfect. I'll go down for breakfast while you work." Rayon collected his leather portfolio. "I appreciate your assistance." As he prepared to leave, he placed a generous tip on the desk along with a handwritten note that read, "Thank you for your dignified and respectful service." Martha watched him exit, her expression thoughtful. In 52 years of housekeeping work, 32 of them at the Grand Lancaster, few guests had ever addressed her by name. Downstairs in the restaurant, Ramon observed the morning service with calculated interest. The dining room featured soaring ceilings with crystal chandeliers and tables draped in crisp white linens. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered magnificent views of the city awakening under golden morning light. Ramon noticed how an older black couple was seated near the service entrance while younger white guests were escorted to window tables. He saw how the Filipino busboy received curt instructions, while the European-looking waitstaff engaged in friendly banter with the maitre. "Coffee, sir?" asked a young waitress whose name tag read, Lucia. Her accent suggested Latin American heritage. "Yes, please," Ramon replied with a warm smile. "And I'd like to try your breakfast specialties." "What would you recommend?" Lucia's professional demeanor softened slightly at his friendly tone. "The eggs, Benedict, are excellent, sir. Chef Marcel's Hollandaise is famous." "Perfect. Thank you, Lucia." As he ate, Ramon watched the restaurant filled with business people and tourists. At a nearby table, he overheard Edward, the receptionist, speaking with a man who appeared to be the hotel manager. "He's the Filipino investor," Edward whispered. "Not quietly enough. The one looking to buy the place." The manager, a tall man with silver temples and an expensive suit, glanced in Ramon's direction. "And you put him in an executive suite instead of the presidential. Christ, Edward, what were you thinking?" "How was I supposed to know? He didn't look like what? A billionaire." "For God's sake, Edward, this isn't the 1980s. The world has changed." The men moved away, but their conversation had confirmed Ramon's suspicions. He finished his breakfast, left another generous tip, and decided to explore the hotel more thoroughly before the 10 a.m. meeting. In the lobby, he noticed a distinguished elderly woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair being assisted by a concierge. Something about her struck him as familiar. Perhaps she had been in the lobby the previous night. She walked with a silver-headed cane but held herself with unmistakable authority. "Dr. Winters, your car is waiting," the concierge said with deferential respect. Dr. Winters. The name triggered Ramon's memory. Dr. Eleanina Winters, renowned philanthropist, and if his research was correct, one of the Grand Lancaster's significant minority shareholders. Their eyes met across the lobby, and she offered a dignified nod of acknowledgement. Ramon returned the gesture, thinking that here perhaps was someone who understood the value of respect. By 9:45 a.m., the Grand Lancaster's management team had assembled in the Montrose conference room. Richard Coburn, the general manager, obsessively checked every detail, from the water pitchers to the alignment of contract folders. His anxiety was palpable. "Is everything perfect?" he asked his assistant for the third time. "This deal will save us from the financial mess the previous management left." "Everything's ready, sir," the young woman assured him. "Mr. Fernandez should be here any minute, and no one says anything about the occupancy rates or last quarter's numbers unless he specifically asks," Coburn instructed the gathered executives. "Focus on potential, not past performance." Edward stood nervously by the door, having been called in to attend at the last minute, an unusual request for a receptionist, but Coburn wanted everyone who had interacted with Rayon present. The tension in the room was thick enough to slice. At precisely 10 a.m., Ramon entered, now wearing a different suit, charcoal grey with subtle pinstripes and a small Philippine flag pin on his lapel. Every head turned. "Mr. Fernandez," Richard Coburn rushed forward, hand extended. "What an honor to finally meet you in person." "The pleasure is mine," Ramon replied, his grip firm as they shook hands. "I've had an enlightening experience at your establishment." Coburn's smile faltered momentarily. "I hope everything has been to your satisfaction." "Let's discuss that," Ramon said, taking a seat at the head of the conference table where the $2.8 billion contract awaited his signature. As lawyers and executives settled into their chairs, Ramon calmly opened his portfolio. "Before we proceed, I'd like to share my observations as a guest." A hush fell over the room. Edward, standing near the wall, seemed to shrink into himself. "You see," Ramon continued, his voice measured and calm, "my grandmother once told me something I've never forgotten. She said, the true quality of any business isn't measured by its profit margin, but by how it treats the least powerful person who walks through its doors." The silence deepened as Ramon placed his hands flat on the table, his eyes scanning each face in the room. "Now, shall we begin our evaluation?" The conference room's climate control hummed softly as Rayon opened a leather folder. Inside were not just financial documents, but photographs, evidence meticulously collected during his brief stay. "Last night," Ramon began, his voice measured and clear, "I was informed that the presidential suite was unavailable due to maintenance issues." He slid a photograph across the polished table. "This was taken at 11:30 p.m. The supposedly under-maintenance presidential suite with lights on and no workers present." Richard Coburn's face flushed red. He shot a sharp glance at Edward, who had gone pale by the door. "Mr. Fernandez," Coburn stammered, "there must be some misunderstanding." "Then there's this," Ramon continued, producing a copy of his original reservation confirmation alongside the welcome note from his room. "My name is misspelled as Hernandez." A small detail, perhaps, but telling. In my experience, respect for details reflects respect for people. The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. A woman in a tailored suit, Vanessa Porter, the sales director, looked particularly mortified. "But the most enlightening part of my stay," Ramon said, his calm demeanor somehow more unsettling than anger would have been, "was observing how your staff interacts with guests of different backgrounds." He described with precision how the dining room seating was arranged, how employees of color were spoken to differently, how assumptions were made based on appearance rather than substance. "Mr. Fernandez," Coburn interjected, sweat beating on his forehead, "I assure you, these are isolated incidents. The Grand Lancaster prides itself on." "May I come in now?" called a voice from the door. All heads turned to see Martha Johnson standing there, hands clasped before her, dignified despite her housekeeping uniform. "Please do, Mrs. Johnson," Ramon said warmly. Martha entered the room with quiet confidence, her back straight despite her 72 years. Several executives looked confused at the presence of a housekeeper in their high-powered meeting. "For those who don't know her," Ramon explained, "Martha Johnson has worked at this hotel for 32 years. She knows more about its day-to-day operations than anyone in this room." Martha nodded respectfully. "That's right. Started here when this place was still called the Wellington before all the marble and fancy chandeliers. Mrs. Johnson has shared with me some observations about how staff members and guests of certain backgrounds are treated here," Ramon continued. Would you mind telling these gentlemen and ladies what you told me, Mrs. Johnson? Martha looked around the room, her eyes lingering on Edward, who couldn't meet her gaze. It's always been this way, she said, her voice soft but unwavering. The Filipino maintenance staff, the Latino kitchen workers. We all know our place. Guests who don't look important enough get rooms with views of the air conditioning units. It's just how things are done here. That's completely false, Coburn exclaimed, his professional veneer cracking. Mrs. Johnson, this is highly inappropriate. Is it inappropriate to speak the truth, Mr. Coburn? Came another voice from the doorway. Dr. Eleanor Winters stood there, leaning slightly on her silver-headed cane. At 78, her presence commanded immediate attention. Dr. Winters. Coburn's voice rose an octave. We weren't expecting you at this meeting. Clearly, she replied dryly, entering the room without waiting for an invitation. Mr. Fernandez contacted my office this morning. We had a most illuminating conversation. Rayon stood respectfully as Dr. Winters approached the table. Thank you for coming, Dr. Winters. When a potential investor raises concerns about discriminatory practices at an establishment where I hold significant shares, it is not just my financial interest, but my moral obligation to attend, she stated firmly, taking a seat beside Ramon. A heavy silence blanketed the room. Through the large windows, sunlight streamed in, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air. Small imperfections, normally invisible, but now glaringly obvious. As a shareholder, Dr. Winters continued, I have questioned the diversity practices of this hotel for years. I've been told repeatedly that changes are coming. Yet here we are with the same issues persisting. Ramon nodded thoughtfully. My company, Pacific International Investments, has a strict policy against investing in businesses that practice systematic discrimination. It's not just an ethical stance, it's good business. Discrimination limits talent pools and alienates potential clients. He closed his folder with deliberate slowness. I came here prepared to sign a $2.8 billion acquisition deal. Instead, I will be withdrawing our offer. The announcement hit like a thunderclap. One executive audibly gasped. Coburn looked as though he might faint. You can't be serious, he sputtered. Over a misunderstanding about a suite, over the exaggerated claims of a housekeeper, the dismissive way Coburn referenced Martha caused Ramon's expression to harden for the first time. That misunderstanding revealed a pattern of behavior, and Mrs. Johnson's exaggerated claims aligned perfectly with my own observations. Dr. Winters tapped her cane once against the floor. Mr. Coburn, your response only confirms the problem. Martha stood tall, her dignity intact despite Coburn's attempt to diminish her. I've cleaned the rooms of presidents and movie stars. I've heard guests from all over the world share their stories. Everyone deserves respect, not just the ones who look like they belong on magazine covers. Ramon rose from his chair. My grandmother, Esperanza Fernandez, worked as a housekeeper in a hotel like this for 47 years. She taught me that true character isn't revealed in good times, but in small moments when people think no one important is watching. He gathered his documents with unhurried precision. The deal is can-led. I believe our business here is concluded. Dr. Winters also stood. Not quite, Mr. Fernandez. As a major shareholder, I would like to formally announce my intention to divest my interests in the Grand Lancaster. Effective immediately. Coburn's face had gone from red to ashen. Dr. Winters, please. This is an overreaction. We can address any concerns. I've given you years to address them, she interrupted. Mr. Fernandez managed to identify these issues in less than 24 hours. No, Richard, my patience has run its course. The news of Dr. Winters' divestment, combined with Pacific International's cancelled acquisition, would send shockwaves through the financial markets. Everyone in the room knew it. As Ramon prepared to leave, he turned to Martha. Thank you for your courage, Mrs. Johnson. Martha smiled, a weight seemingly lifted from her shoulders. After 32 years, sir, it feels good to finally say what needed saying. Rayon extended his arm to Dr. Winters. May I escort you out, Doctor? You certainly may, Mr. Fernandez, she replied with an appreciative nod. Together with Martha, they left the conference room, leaving behind a table of stunned executives contemplating the financial disaster unfolding before them. As they walked through the lobby, guests and staff alike sensed something momentous had occurred, though none could have guessed that the future of the Grand Lancaster had just been irrevocably altered. What no one in that conference room could have anticipated was that this was not the end of Ramon Fernandez's interest in the Grand Lancaster, but merely the beginning of a transformation that would ripple through the entire hospitality industry. News travels quickly in the interconnected worlds of high finance and luxury hospitality. By noon, rumors about the failed acquisition were circulating among industry insiders. By 3 o'clock, Lancaster Hotel's group stock had dropped 12%. By closing bell, the decline had steepened to a staggering 27% plunge. In her Upper East Side apartment, Dr. Eleanina Winters sipped Earl Grey tea from a delicate bone china cup as she watched the financial news. Her cat, Maximiliana, dignified Persian with silver fur that matched her hair, sat regally beside her on the brocade sofa. "Well, Max," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. "It appears we've caused quite the commotion today." The telephone rang the 5th call from her financial advisor in as many hours. She let it go to voicemail. Today's actions hadn't been about money. They'd been about principles too long deferred. Across town in a modest apartment in Queens, Martha Johnson removed her uniform for what she thought might be the last time. After speaking out against her employer, she expected to be terminated. Strangely, she felt more relief than anxiety. At 72, retirement was overdue anyway. Her small tabby cat, Cinnamon, wound around her ankles as she changed into comfortable slacks and a floral blouse. "We might need to tighten our belts a bit, Cinny," she told the cat, who purred unconcernedly. "But some things matter more than a paycheck." "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Dr. Quintus had it," he explained. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I wanted to check on you. I suspect today wasn't easy." Martha laughed softly. "Easier than the last 32 years of keeping quiet, if I'm honest." "I admire your courage," Ramon said. "I'm calling because I'd like to invite you to a meeting tomorrow morning. Nothing formal, perhaps breakfast at the Riverside Cafe at 9 o'clock. "Me? But why would because I have a proposition that might interest you?" Ramon replied. "And because I value your insights." After hanging up, Martha stared at the phone in wonder. In all her years of service, no executive had ever sought her opinion about anything more significant than which cleaning products worked best on marble. Meanwhile, at the Grand Lancaster, chaos reigned. Emergency board meetings were called. PR specialists were summoned. Edward, the receptionist, was terminated by days and a sacrificial lamb to demonstrate the hotel's commitment to change. Richard Coburn paced his office, tie loosened, hair disheveled from repeatedly running his hands through it. "This is a nightmare," he muttered to his assistant. "2 major investors pulling out in one day. The press will crucify us when this gets out." "Sir," his assistant ventured hesitantly, 3 more shareholders have called requesting urgent meetings, and the Hospitality Equality Commission sent an email asking for a statement regarding allegations of discriminatory practices." Coburn collapsed into his chair. How did everything fall apart so quickly? The answer, had he been wise enough to see it, was simple. Foundations built on discrimination had always been destined to crumble. The Grand Lancaster's facade of luxury had merely concealed structural flaws that had been spreading for decades. At 6 o'clock that evening, Ramon sat in his temporary office at the Westin, where he'd relocated after leaving the Lancaster, on a video call with his daughter Sophia in Manila. He explained the day's events. "So, you can lead a multi-billion-dollar deal because the receptionist was rude?" Sophia asked, one eyebrow raised skeptically. Ramon smiled mysteriously. "Not wasted. Redirected. I have another strategy in mind. Only your great-grandmother Esperanza would approve of." After finishing the call, Ramon reviewed emails from his executive team. News of the Lancaster situation had reached them, and opinions varied wildly, some applauding his ethical stance, others questioning the financial wisdom of walking away from such a lucrative deal. His phone chimed with a text from Dr. Winters. "Dinner tomorrow." "I have some thoughts that might align with yours," Ramon replied affirmatively, then returned to his contemplation of the city skyline. The Lancaster had been meant to be Pacific International's flagship property in their North American expansion. Its sudden removal from their portfolio created both challenges and opportunities. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant entered with a folder. "The information you requested, sir." Ramon nodded approvingly. "Excellent." As night fell over the city, 3 individuals in different locations contemplated the same institution with very different emotions. Richard Coburn drank scotch in his office, surrounded by projections of financial ruin, wondering how to save the unsalvageable. Martha Johnson sat on her small balcony with Cinnamon, watching the stars appear one by one, feeling strangely free despite an uncertain future. And Ramon Fernandez reviewed documents late into the night, formulating a plan that would transform not just the Grand Lancaster, but perhaps the standards of the entire luxury hospitality industry. None of them could have predicted exactly how their lives would intertwine in the coming months, or how a simple act of discrimination would ultimately lead to a revolution of dignity. Yet, the wheels were already in motion, set spinning by the courage of those who dared to speak truth to power. Tomorrow's breakfast meeting would be just the beginning. The Riverside Cafe offered a stark contrast to the Grand Lancaster's opulence. Here, mismatched chairs surrounded worn wooden tables, and the aroma of fresh-baked bread mingled with coffee scents. Morning sunlight streamed through large windows, casting golden rectangles on the checkerboard floor. Ramon arrived first, selecting a quiet corner table. He wore casual attire today, dark jeans and a crisp blue button-down, deliberate departure from his executive persona. Dr. Eleanina Winters appeared precisely at 9 o'clock, elegant in a tailored pantsuit despite the informal setting. Her silver cane tapped rhythmically as she approached. "Good morning, Mr. Fernandez," she greeted him, easing into a chair. "I see you appreciate authentic establishments as well as luxury ones. The best businesses, regardless of price point, share a common trait," Ramon replied, standing until she was seated. "They treat every person with dignity." Martha Johnson arrived moments later looking nervous in her Sunday dress of floral print she deliberated over for nearly an hour that morning. "Mrs. Johnson," Ramon greeted her warmly. "Thank you for coming." "Please call me Martha," she insisted, settling into her. Plaza's event deliberately honored those who would create the guest experience daily. At precisely noon, Sophia arrived with Esperanza, who beamed as she entered the hotel, leaning on her granddaughter's arm. At 92, the journey from Manila had been taxing, but nothing would have prevented her attendance. "Grandmother," Ramon greeted her, embracing her gently. Distinguished guests, friends, family, and valued team members, Ramon began. Today marks not just the opening of a hotel, but the continuation of a journey toward a more dignified vision of hospitality. He gestured to his grandmother. 47 years ago, Esperanza Fernandez began working as a housekeeper in a luxury hotel in Manila. Each day she cleaned rooms she could never afford to stay in. For 32 years, I made beds and cleaned bathrooms at the Lancaster Hotel. I was essential but invisible. At Harmony Plaza, there are no invisible people. Every role is acknowledged, every voice valued. Eleanina followed. As an investor with decades of experience, I've watched the hospitality industry prioritize marble and crystal over the human elements that truly create memorable experiences. Harmony Plaza inverts that equation, putting people first and believing that prosperity will follow. Sophia concluded the opening remarks. The future of luxury isn't about exclusivity, but about creating spaces where everyone belongs while experiencing exceptional service. That's not just good ethics, it's good business. With that, Ramon invited Esperanza forward. "Grandmother, would you do us the honor of cutting the ribbon?" As the elderly woman stepped forward, a hush fell over the crowd. With hands that had cleaned countless rooms over nearly 5 decades, she took the ceremonial scissors. Before cutting, she spoke briefly, her voice soft but clear. "In my years as a housekeeper, I learned that a truly clean room leaves no trace of the effort behind its perfection." She smiled at the assembled staff. "But today, I want every person who works here to leave their mark to be seen, heard, and valued. This is not my achievement to claim, but ours to share." With that, she cut the ribbon, officially opening Harmony Plaza to thunderous applause. As guests streamed in, Martha found herself approached by a familiar face, a young Filipino maintenance worker who had previously worked at the Lancaster. "Mrs. Johnson," he greeted her warmly. "Thank you for recommending me for the engineering team here. It's different. My supervisor actually asked for my input on the ventilation system upgrades." Martha smiled. "That's precisely the point, Miguel." Fernandez is painting us as discriminatory dinosaurs. We must counter that perception today. A PR specialist nodded eagerly. "We've drafted a comprehensive diversity statement for immediate release. We are also recommending a press conference announcing new inclusion initiatives." "What about the employee who spoke against us, the housekeeper?" asked a board member. Coburn's expression darkened. "Martha Johnson has been with the hotel for decades. As the Lancaster scrambled to rehabilitate its image, Martha Johnson received an unexpected visitor at her apartment. A sleek town car had delivered Vanessa Porter to the modest Queens neighborhood, a location that clearly made the executive uncomfortable. "Mrs. Johnson," Vanessa began after being invited in, her eyes darting around the small living room with its worn but immaculately clean furniture. "The Lancaster Hotel would like to offer you an exciting new opportunity." Martha listened skeptically as Vanessa outlined a newly created position, Director of Staff Relations, reporting directly to Richard Coburn. "The salary would be triple your current compensation." Vanessa concluded with a practiced smile. "Plus benefits, of course." Martha's tabby cat, Cinnamon, jumped onto the sofa between them, eyeing the visitor suspiciously. "That's very generous," Martha replied, stroking the cat. "May I ask what prompted this sudden interest in my insights after 32 years of invisibility?" Vanessa's smile faltered slightly. "The Lancaster is evolving, Mrs. Johnson. Recent events have highlighted areas for improvement." "Recent events," Martha repeated softly. "That's not really your business, is it?" Martha replied mildly. "Please thank Mr. Coburn for his offer. I'll consider it carefully." After showing Vanessa out, Martha immediately called Rayon to report the unexpected proposal. His response surprised her. "You should accept it," he said without hesitation. "Accept? But I thought having you on the inside during this transitional period could be invaluable," Ramon explained. "Just be careful. They'll try to use you as a shield against criticism while limiting your actual influence." Meanwhile, Elelanina Winters was fighting her own battle at an emergency shareholder meeting. The Lancaster's management had proposed a rapid implementation of diversity initiatives to stabilize the company's plummeting stock price. "While I applaud this sudden conversion to inclusivity," Elelanina addressed the gathered shareholders, her voice steady despite her 78 years, "I question its sincerity. True change requires more than hastily drafted statements and symbolic appointments." "Dr. Winters," Coburn interjected, "we value your decades of involvement with the Lancaster. Your concerns have been heard and we are responding decisively." "After years of ignoring my concerns," Elelanina countered, "your decisive response coincides remarkably with a threat to your positions." The tension in the room was palpable. As Eleanor continued, transformation requires structural change, not cosmetic adjustments designed to plague critics while maintaining the status quo. Several shareholders nodded in agreement, others shifted uncomfortably. "What would satisfy you, Dr. Winters?" asked the board chairman directly. Eleanor smiled slightly. "A genuine overhaul of governance structures to ensure diversity and respect our core operational values, not just PR talking points." By day's end, battle lines had been clearly drawn. The Lancaster's management was fighting for survival, implementing surface-level changes while resisting deeper transformation. Pacific International was methodically preparing for an acquisition that would face significant resistance. Caught between these powerful forces were Martha Johnson and Elelanina Winterstew, women whose lived experiences and moral courage had catalyzed a corporate earthquake. That evening, Ramon received an unexpected call from Richard Coburn himself. "Mr. Fernandez," Coburn began without preamble, "I believe we got off on the wrong foot. I'd like to invite you back to the Lancaster as our guest, not a potential buyer." They want to parade their sudden commitment to diversity before you torpedo their stock value further. Undoubtedly, Eleanor agreed. The question is, do we spring their trap or avoid it? Rayon smiled, though they couldn't see it through the phone. "Oh, we spring it, but on our terms. After all, the best defense is a good offense." What the Lancaster's management didn't realize was that Ramon Fernandez had been underestimated his entire career. The son of Filipino immigrants who had built a global investment empire was not easily outmaneuvered, especially not by those who had already revealed the fundamental flaw in their character. The belief that dignity was something bestowed by the powerful rather than inherent in every human being. Tomorrow's celebration of diversity promised to be enlightening indeed, though perhaps not in the way Richard Coburn intended. Despite the perfect climate control, his eyes constantly darted to the entrance, awaiting Ramon Fernandez. "Any sign of him?" Vanessa Porter whispered, maintaining her professional smile. "Not yet," Coburn replied through gritted teeth. "Make sure the media captures everything, especially our diverse staff members interacting with guests." Martha Johnson observed this performance from her position near the refreshment table, now wearing a tailored suit instead of her housekeeping uniform. Her new title Director of Staff Relations was emblazoned on a shiny name badge. Several reporters had already approached her for quotes about the Lancaster's transformative journey. "Mrs. Johnson," called one eager journalist, "how does it feel to be elevated from housekeeper to executive in just 3 days?" Before Martha could answer, Ellenina Winters appeared beside her, resplendent in midnight blue evening wear. "Perhaps," Ellenina interjected smoothly. "The more pertinent question is why it took 32 years of dedicated service before Mrs. Johnson's insights were valued by management." The reporter's eyes widened at this unscripted response, quickly jotting notes. "Dr. Winters," Martha acknowledged with a warm smile. "I'm so glad you came." "I wouldn't miss this performance for the world," Ellenina replied, her voice low, "though I fear our friend may have decided to skip the charade." As if summoned by her words, a murmur swept through the lobby. Ramon Fernandez had arrived, but not alone. With him stood an elderly Filipino woman, small in stature, but commanding in presence. Despite her 92 years, Esperanza Fernandez carried herself with unmistakable dignity, her silver hair arranged in an elegant chignon, her hand resting lightly on her grandson's arm. Behind them came Sofia Fernandez, Ramon's daughter, accompanied by a diverse group that Martha and Eleanor recognized from news photos as Pacific International's executive team. Coburn rushed forward. "Mr. Fernandez, what an unexpected pleasure. We are delighted you could join our celebration of diversity." Ramon nodded politely. "Richard, I'd like you to meet my grandmother, Esperanza Fernandez. She worked as a hotel housekeeper in Manila for 47 years. Esperanza extended a vain hand. "Your hotel is very beautiful, Mr. Coburn, much like the one where I worked, though their the most beautiful rooms were rarely available to guests who looked like me or my grandson." Coburn's smile froze as cameras captured the exchange. "Mrs. Fernandez, welcome to the Lancaster. I assure you, we are implementing comprehensive changes to ensure all guests receive equal treatment." "Wonderful," Esperanza replied, her eyes sharp despite her age. "Perhaps you could begin by explaining why your Filipino maintenance staff is currently entering through the service corridor while white employees use the main entrance." The four of them, Esperanza, Ramon, Ellenina, and Martha, created a magnetic center in the room. Guests and reporters gravitated toward them while the Lancaster's management team watched anxiously from the periphery. Sofia Fernandez approached her father. "Everything is prepared," she murmured. "Just say the word." Ramon nodded, then addressed the growing circle around them. "I believe Mr. Coburn planned to make an announcement about the Lancaster's new diversity initiatives." Coburn stepped forward, summoning his most confident expression. "Indeed, if I could have everyone's attention, please." The crowd quieted as he launched into a carefully crafted speech about the Lancasters' deepened commitment to inclusion and renewed focus on equity at all levels. I've been invisible, present but unseen, essential but unacknowledged. The room fell silent. 2 nights ago, a man checked in who saw me, who noticed not just my uniform, but my humanity. She gestured toward Ramon when he experienced discrimination himself. He didn't just walk away. He resolved to create change. Coburn tried to interject, but Martha continued, her voice stronger. The Lancaster is announcing cosmetic changes to protect its market value. But real transformation requires more than new titles and press releases. It requires a fundamental shift in how we value human dignity. She turned to face Coburn directly. I'm declining the position of Director of Staff Relations. The role was offered not to harness my experience, but to silence my voice. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Instead, Martha continued. I've accepted a position with Pacific Harmony Hospitality, a new venture dedicated to creating truly inclusive luxury environments. Sophia stepped forward, distributing press packets to stunned reporters. Pacific Harmony Hospitality is officially launching tonight, she announced. A subsidiary of Pacific International Investments focused exclusively on transforming the luxury hospitality industry. Ramon moved to join them. Rather than acquiring the Lancaster, we've decided to build something new, a model of hospitality, where respect is the true luxury. We've purchased the Morrison Building 3 blocks from here, which will be renovated into our flagship property. Elelonina Winters tapped her cane for attention. As the first major investor in Pacific Harmony, I'm pleased to announce that Martha Johnson will serve as Chief Dignity Officer, developing training programs to ensure that respect becomes operational, not aspirational. And I, added Esperanza, her voice soft but carrying, will serve as honorary chairwoman of the board. At 92, I've waited long enough to see a luxury hotel where people who look like me are valued, whether they arrive as guests or employees. That 2 former housekeepers would cause such a commotion in a place like this? Martha laughed. Never. But then they never imagined we were paying attention all those years. Across the room, Rayon watched his grandmother and Martha deep in conversation while Elelonina fielded questions from business reporters. Sophia stood at his side, reviewing the overwhelmingly positive initial reactions on her tablet. You never intended to buy the Lancaster, did you? She asked quietly. Ramon smiled. Sometimes the best way to transform an industry isn't to acquire its flawed institutions, but to create better alternatives that force them to evolve or perish. The glittering event continued, but its focus had irrevocably shifted. What had begun as the Lancaster's attempt to rehabilitate its image had become the launch of a revolution, one built on the simple but powerful premise that true luxury is measured not in marble and crystal, but in the respect with which we treat each human being. 6 months later, a gentle summer breeze carried the scent of jasmine through the open doors of the newly renovated Morrison Building. No longer a faded office complex, it now stood as Harmony Plaza, the flagship property of Pacific Harmony Hospitality, which had rapidly expanded to include properties on 3 continents. The grand opening ceremony was minutes away. In the elegant lobby, where marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, final preparations were underway. Unlike traditional luxury hotels, however, Harmony Plaza's opulence was matched by its warmth design elements from Filipino, African American, Latino, and European traditions blended seamlessly throughout the space. In a quiet corner office, Ramon adjusted his tie, pausing to touch the small pin bearing the Philippine flag on his lapel. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called. Martha entered elegant in a tailored dress, a far cry from her former housekeeping uniform. The past 6 months as Chief Dignity Officer had transformed not just her wardrobe but her entire bearing. At 72, she carried herself with the confidence of someone whose wisdom was finally being valued. The press is assembled, she reported, and we've just received word that Esperanza's flight has landed. Sophia is escorting her from the airport now. Ramon smiled. Perfect timing. Are you nervous? Martha asked. Not about the opening, Ramon replied thoughtfully, but about living up to our promises. Creating a truly inclusive luxury experience is uncharted territory, which is precisely why it will succeed. came Ellenina's voice as she entered, leaning less heavily on her silver cane. These days, her investment in Pacific Harmony had energized her, giving new purpose to her later years. Innovation always emerges at the edges, not the center. Together, they walk through the lobby where staff members diverse in age, ethnicity, and background prepared to welcome the world to a new vision of hospitality. Meanwhile, across town, the Grand Lancaster Hotel stood like a fading dowager, its lobby noticeably less bustling than in previous years. Despite implementing genuine reforms after the PR disaster 6 months earlier, the Lancaster had struggled to shed its tarnished reputation. Richard Coburn had been replaced. Edward, the discriminatory receptionist, had found no other positions in luxury hospitality. The new management team was earnestly attempting to rebuild, but the Lancaster stock had never recovered from its precipitous fall. Back at Harmony Plaza, guests began arriving for the grand opening industry leaders, media, celebrities, and a special section reserved for every employee's family members. Unlike traditional hotel openings where staff remained invisible during celebrations, Harmony Plaza's event deliberately honored those who would create the guest experience daily. At precisely noon, Sophia arrived with Esperanza, who beamed as she entered the hotel, leaning on her granddaughter's arm. At 92, the journey from Manila had been taxing, but nothing would have prevented her attendance. Grandmother, Ramon greeted her, embracing her gently. Distinguished guests, friends, family, and valued team members, Ramon began. Today marks not just the opening of a hotel, but the continuation of a journey toward a more dignified vision of hospitality. He gestured to his grandmother. 47 years ago, Esperanza Fernandez began working as a housekeeper in a luxury hotel in Manila. Each day she cleaned rooms she could never afford to stay in. For 32 years, I made beds and cleaned bathrooms at the Lancaster Hotel. I was essential but invisible. At Harmony Plaza, there are no invisible people. Every role is acknowledged, every voice valued. Ellenina followed. As an investor with decades of experience, I've watched the hospitality industry prioritize marble and crystal over the human elements that truly create memorable experiences. Harmony Plaza inverts that equation, putting people first and believing that prosperity will follow. Sophia concluded the opening remarks. The future of luxury isn't about exclusivity, but about creating spaces where everyone belongs while experiencing exceptional service. That's not just good ethics, it's good business. With that, Ramon invited Esperanza forward. Grandmother, would you do us the honor of cutting the ribbon? As the elderly woman stepped forward, a hush fell over the crowd. With hands that had cleaned countless rooms over nearly 5 decades, she took the ceremonial scissors. Before cutting, she spoke briefly, her voice soft but clear. In my years as a housekeeper, I learned that a truly clean room leaves no trace of the effort behind its perfection. She smiled at the assembled staff. But today, I want every person who works here to leave their mark to be seen, heard, and valued. This is not my achievement to claim, but ours to share. With that, she cut the ribbon, officially opening Harmony Plaza to thunderous applause. As guests streamed in, Martha found herself approached by a familiar face, a young Filipino maintenance worker who had previously worked at the Lancaster. Mrs. Johnson, he greeted her warmly. Thank you for recommending me for the engineering team here. It's different. My supervisor actually asked for my input on the ventilation system upgrades. Martha smiled. That's precisely the point, Miguel. Chair, after yesterday, I think we are past formalities. A young waitress approached with a genuine smile. Good morning. Coffee to start. After ordering black coffee for Ramon, English breakfast tea for Ellenina, and coffee with cream for Martha, they fell into a momentary silence. 3 strangers connected by the previous day's extraordinary events. Ellenina broke the silence first. I've been a shareholder in Lancaster Hotels for 27 years. In that time, I've watched the company lose its founding principles in pursuit of higher profit margins. If this story moved you, imagine what's next. Subscribe to Global Truth Project. Martha nodded. When I started, Mr. to Wellington himself. The original owner knew every employee by name. He'd ask about our families, remember our birthdays. After the corporate takeover in '95, all that changed. Ramon listened intently, making mental notes. Yesterday was merely a symptom of a long-developing problem. Then precisely, Elena confirmed, thanking the waitress as she delivered their drinks. Now, Mr. Fernandez, I suspect you didn't invite us here merely for a post-mortem on the Lancasters' cultural failings. Ramon smiled appreciatively at her directness. Indeed, not, Dr. Winters. Eleanor, please. Eleanor, he inclined his head respectfully. I invited you both because I'm considering a bold move, and I value your perspectives. He outlined his thinking. Pacific International might still acquire the Lancaster at the previously negotiated price, but at the significantly reduced valuation that would inevitably result from the current crisis. The hotel stock has already dropped nearly 30%, he explained. Within weeks, it will likely fall further. At that point, a takeover would be financially advantageous. Sounds like shrewd business, Eleanor observed, stirring her tea. But how is this different from vulture capitalism? Ramon leaned forward. Because our goal wouldn't be to strip the asset and flip it. It would be transformation, creating a model of inclusive luxury hospitality that could set new industry standards. Martha looked skeptical. Changing an established culture isn't easy. Believe me, I've watched a dozen management teams come and go, all with big plans, which is precisely why I need people like you, Ramon replied. People who understand the institutional history and have witnessed both its successes and failures. Their breakfast arrived armlets for Ramon and Martha, steel-cut oatmeal for Eleanor. As they ate, Ramon elaborated on his vision, a complete overhaul of the Lancasters' operational philosophy, emphasizing respect at every level. Beautiful words, Elena said. But what specifically would change? Ramon smiled. First, every employee would receive comprehensive anti-discrimination training. Not the superficial corporate variety, but genuine education. That's been tried, Martha interjected. People sit through the videos, check the boxes, and go right back to their old habits. Which is why the second change would be structural, Ramon continued. We'd create a dignity committee with actual authority, comprised of employees from every department and level, including housekeeping, maintenance, and kitchen staff. Martha's eyebrows rose. You'd give housekeepers a say in how the hotel runs. Absolutely. Who knows better how guests and staff interact than the people often rendered invisible in luxury spaces? Ramon turned to Elena. And I'd like the committee to include shareholder representation as well, someone with both financial stake and moral compass. Elena's eyes sparkled with interest. You're describing a governance revolution, not just a cultural one. Precisely, Ramon confirmed. The third element would be measurement. We'd implement anonymous feedback systems for both guests and staff with metrics tracking respect and dignity alongside traditional hospitality measures. Martha sipped her coffee thoughtfully. And what happens when profits dip because some rich client doesn't like being told they CA and talk down to the Filipino maintenance man? Ramon's expression remained steady. Then we accept the short-term financial impact for long-term ethical gain. My company takes a 10-year view on investments, not quarterly. Elena tapped her fingernails against her teacup. You'd need buying from remaining shareholders. Many won't appreciate this approach, which is why we'd offer them a fair exit opportunity, Ramon explained. Those who share our vision stay. Those who don't can sell their shares without penalty. As breakfast concluded, Ramon placed a final proposal before them. Martha would be offered a new position as Hospitality Dignity Supervisor, responsible for training staff in respectful service practices. Elena would be invited to head the shareholder contingent on the Dignity Committee. You're serious about this? Martha said, wonder in her voice. I've never been more serious, Ramon confirmed. My grandmother worked in hotels her entire life. She deserved respect every day of those 47 years. This would honor her legacy. And when would this hypothetical transformation begin? Elena asked. Ramon's smile broadened. Phase 1 started yesterday when we walked out of that meeting. Phase 2 begins next week when our acquisition team makes its first discounted offer. As they departed the cafe, all three felt the weight of possibility. Martha, who had arrived expecting nothing more than a kind farewell, left with renewed purpose. Elena, who had been contemplating retirement from business affairs, found herself energized by a challenge worthy of her experience and values. And Ramon, who had originally sought only a strategic acquisition, discovered instead an opportunity to reshape an industry, one that had too often confused luxury with exclusion. None of them noticed the young man at a nearby table, hastily typing notes into his phone, a junior reporter for the Financial Chronicle, who had recognized Dr. Winters and stayed to eavesdrop. By afternoon, speculation about Pacific International's hostile takeover and radical restructuring. Plans for the Lancaster would be circulating in business circles across the city. Seeds of transformation had been planted, and they would grow faster than anyone anticipated. The headline dominated the Financial Chronicle's business section. Pacific International eyes struggling Lancaster after failed deal. Radical dignity restructuring planned. In his temporary office, Ramon frowned at the article on his tablet. Details of the breakfast meeting, though somewhat distorted, were prominently featured. Their private conversation had become public strategy. His phone rang. Sophia, calling from Manila. "Papa, have you seen the news?" She asked without preamble. "Everyone's talking about your dignity revolution. Our investors are calling non-stop." Ramon sighed. "Premature publicity complicates matters." "That's an understatement," Sophia replied. "The Lancaster's board is already mounting a defensive strategy.